While it is October, let's jump ahead a little bit to January, which is also known as National Stalking Awareness Month. Stalking is defined by the federal government as a course of conduct directed at an individual that places that person in reasonable fear of the death of or serious bodily injury to that person, an immediate family member, or a spouse or intimate partner of that person, or causes, attempts to cause, or would reasonably be expected to cause substantial emotional distress to that person, a family member, or an intimate partner. According to Spark, the Stalking Prevention and Resource Center, based in Washington, D.C., 14 out of every 1,000 people are stalked in a one-year period in the United States. Nearly 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men have experienced stalking victimization at some point in their lifetime. The majority of stalking victims are stalked by someone they know, and many victims are stalked by a current or former intimate partner or by an acquaintance. People aged 18 to 24 have the highest rate of stalking victimization. And while stalking is a very big issue, state laws don't always protect stalking victims. Although stalking is a crime in all 50 states, less than 1/3 of states classify stalking as a felony if it's a first offense. This leaves stalking victims without protections afforded to victims of other violent crimes. And despite all this, throughout all genres of music, there have always been and will always be stalker and stalking songs, whether or not you know that is what they are. Some are glaringly obvious. And some seem to slip through the cracks.
I've got a plan. Boy, don't you know you can't escape me? Ooh, darling, 'cause you'll always be my baby. So I can watch you weave and breathe your storyline.
But if you're watching this, you've read the title and thumbnail, and you know that this week, in episode of 2 of 5, during the spookiest month of the year, we are going to be discussing a song that can never be misconstrued as being anything other than what it is, a song from the viewpoint of a relentless stalker. The 1996 chart-topping hit by a Scottish-fronted Wisconsin alternative rock band Garbage with their song Number One Crush. Hello to all you things that go bump in the night, and welcome back to Heard It in a Love Song, the show where we take a hearse ride to the past to find out the history of our favorite love songs. My name is Richard Hunt, and this week, as we delve deeper into October, we bring a little Garbage into our life to look at just one of their hit songs, Number One Crush.
I'm only happy when it rains.
We start our story in Edinburgh, Scotland, on August 26, 1966. That is where and when we meet up with John and Muriel Manson as they welcome into the world their second daughter, Shirley Ann Manson. Their first being born 2 years prior, named Lindy Jane, and their second being born 2 years later, named Sarah. Shirley was named after her aunt, who in turn was named after the novel of the same name by Charlotte Bronte. John was a professor at a university, but it was Muriel that really became a driving force in who Shirley would grow up to be, as Muriel was a singer in a big band outfit. Shirley's first public performance was in 1970 at the age of 4, with her older sister in an amateur show held at the local Church Hill Theater. Enrolled at Flora Stevenson Primary School, she received instruction in recorder, clarinet, and fiddle. And she learned ballet and piano at the age of 7. She attended the City of Edinburgh Music School, the music department of Broughton High School. While at Broughton, she became an active member of its drama group, performing in amateur dramatic and musical performances such as The American Dream and The Wizard of Oz, while also singing with the Waverly Singers, a local girl choir. A 1981 Edinburgh Festival production of Maurice the Minotaur, in which she played a prophet, was awarded with a Fringe First Award by the Scotsman newspaper. However, what should have been a great time for learning and exploring her passion for music was a time marred by insults and bouts of depression. Teased and singled out by other children based on her looks, Shirley went through emotional torment. Her green eyes and red hair inspired such cruel names as Bloodhound and Frog-Eyed, and the taunting left her reluctant to go anywhere without some form of makeup. In an interview with loudandquiet.com, Shirley said, "In primary school, I really loved it, and I was a good student, a very dedicated, serious soul. But when I went to secondary school, I was unfortunate enough to have a crazy girl in my class. She was really physically big and intimidating, and she came from a really hard part of town. She constantly bullied me. It wasn't actually for that long, in hindsight, but it felt like an eternity at that age. For about a year it went on. Although, mercifully for me, she got pregnant and left school. I was relieved of my torturer, but she had robbed any kind of joy that I had gleaned from being there. I was skipping school and hanging out with the older boys, smoking, drinking, and starting to experiment with drugs. I was just sort of wild. My hair literally looked like a bird's nest, but I thought I was cool as shit. There was a female singer in Edinburgh in a band called Hey Elastica. I was kind of obsessed with her." Manson revealed that during her adolescence, she carried a sharp object in the laces of her boots and cut herself when she felt stress, depression, or anxiety. The bullying stopped when Manson associated herself with a rebel crowd, which resulted in her rebelling herself. She was absent for most of her final year at school, much to her parents' chagrin, and began smoking pot, sniffing glue, drinking alcohol, shoplifting, and on one occasion breaking into the Edinburgh Zoo, though she notes that they got nowhere near any animals, and nor did they have any interest in doing so. Manson had teenage ambitions to become an actress, but was rejected by the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. Her first job was volunteer work in a local hospital's cafeteria, then as a breakfast waitress at a local hotel, before spending 5 years as a shop assistant for Miss Selfridge. She started on the shop's makeup counters, but she eventually moved into stockrooms because of her attitude towards customers. She became well known throughout Edinburgh's clubbing scene, making use of free samples from Miss Selfridge. She styled hair for a number of local bands. She also briefly modeled clothing for Jackie magazine. Manson's first musical experiences came from briefly singing with local Edinburgh acts, the Wild Indians, and performing backing vocals with Autumn 1904. And while she was performing with her group, Manson was approached by Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie's Martin Metcalf to join his band, and it wasn't long before the two started dating, with her being quoted as saying, "I was in a sexual relationship with the lead singer. Right there, that's not good. What's the saying they have in America? Don't cook your wiener on the company grill?" Yeah, it was not a good scene. Her relationship with the lead singer was traumatic for her because of his constant infidelity. "It literally broke me," she recalled in Rolling Stone. She would remain working with the band after splitting from him and became a prominent member, performing keyboards, backing vocals, and becoming involved in the band's business side. Manson's first release with the Mackenzies was a release of Death of a Salesman in 1984. Three years later, the group signed a major record deal with Capitol Records, and they released their first album, Good Deeds and Dirty Rags, and their only UK Top 40 entry, The Rattler. In 1990, the group's contract was transferred to Parlophone, an EMI label, but after 2 singles failed to chart, Parlophone declined to release the group's second album, Hammer and Tongs. Guy Kerfist, whose client list as a manager included the Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, the B-52s, the Eurythmics, and Jane's Addiction, bought the Mackenzies' contract and issued their second album through his own label, Radioactive Records, which is a subsidiary of MCA Records. After another failed single, the group were persuaded to leave Radioactive by their management. The Mackenzies continued to write material, and Manson was also given the opportunity to record lead vocals on a number of tracks planned for the band's third album. Although MCA had no desire to further their commitments to Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie, the label expressed interest in recording an album with Manson. And after hearing several demos, Kerfist signed Manson to Radioactive as a solo artist, with the remaining Mackenzies performing as their backing band to circumvent the band's existing deal with MCA. Manson's contract obliged her to deliver at least 1 album and the sole option of Radioactive up to 6 additional albums. Manson's experience playing in Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie, paired with the MCA contractual obligation, led her to take the position of lead vocals in another band, Angelfish. Angelfish, using some newly written material and previously unreleased Mackenzie B-sides, recorded the tracks that would make up the self-titled Angelfish album in Connecticut with Talking Heads, Chris France, and Tina Weymouth, who was also the lead singer of the Tom Tom Club. The album's second track, Suffocate Me, was sent to college radio where it was well received. A second single, Heartbreak to Hate, followed in 1994.
From heartbreak to hate. From heartbreak to hate.
Angelfish toured Belgium, Canada, France, and the US, and the band co-supported live on a tour of North America along with Vic Chestnut. It was around this time that fate intervened by means of a chance encounter with late-night MTV programming. MTV's 120 Minutes began airing in March 1986. For the first 10 years of 120 Minutes, viewers could see artists as varied as
are the same that burn crosses. Ouija boards, would you work for me? Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Famously, Nirvana's music video for Smells Like Teen Spirit received a world premiere on 120 Minutes, but soon proved so popular that the channel began to air it during its regular daytime rotation. Like I said, fate pulled a few strings, and as it were, producer and musician Steve Marker caught the broadcast premiere of Angel Fish's video for Suffocate Me, and thought Manson would be a great singer for his new band, Garbage.
Garbage Day! Huh? No!
Garbage originated in the Madison, Wisconsin warehouse that is home to Smart Studios, a successful enterprise founded in 1984 by Butch Vig and Steve Marker. Some very well-known albums were born at Smart Studios: Nirvana's Nevermind, The Smashing Pumpkins' Gish, Fall Out Boy's Take This to Your Grave, Hawthorne Heights' The Silence in Black and White, and Death Cab for Cutie's Plans. Vig and Marker had met at Madison's University of Wisconsin, where Vig majored in film, but spent a great deal of his time composing soundtracks. With another friend, Duke Erickson, Vig had enjoyed minor local success with a band called Spooner. When they disbanded in 1987, after 3 records, they occasionally played in another group called Firetown, but devoted their time to producing records for other bands. In 1994, as Vig became kind of burned out on doing really long records, he got together with Erickson and Marker, and they started doing remixes for acts such as U2, Depeche Mode, 9 Inch Nails, and House of Pain. The remixes featured different instrumentation and often highlighted new guitar hooks and bass grooves. This experience inspired the men to form a band where they wanted to take that remix sensibility and somehow translate it all into possibilities of a band setup. According to Vig, the team drew inspiration from its name from a hostile early comment when a friend of the band heard the recording material and groaned, "This shit sounds like garbage." However, according to This Is the Noise That Keeps Me Awake, an autobiography of the band, Vig wrote in his 1993 studio journal about the creative process of working for long periods of time without coming up with anything cool. And when you least expect it, it all falls into place. The name derives from the last line of his entry. I hope that all this garbage will become something beautiful. Dazzled by Angel Fish, Marker convinced fellow bandmates Duke Erickson and Butch Vig to meet up with Shirley in a swanky London hotel, The Landmark, on April 8, 1994. The meeting was a great success, as everyone got along swimmingly. But if you are good with your dates, you know that April 8th, 1994 was a huge day in the world of alternative music.
Hi, I'm Kurt Loder with an MTV News special report on a very sad day. Kurt Cobain, the leader of one of rock's most gifted and promising bands, Nirvana, is dead, and this is the story as we know it so far. Cobain's body was found in a house in Seattle on Friday morning. He was dead of an apparently self-inflicted shotgun blast to the head. Police found what is said to be a suicide note at the scene, but have not yet divulged its contents. Cobain, who was 27, had reportedly been missing for about 6 days, according to his mother. The Los Angeles Times reported on Wednesday that Nirvana was breaking up and that Cobain was planning to undergo drug rehabilitation. A source close to the band told MTV News earlier this week that while that story sounded bad, it was better than what was, quote, really going on. That comment remains to be clarified. Cobain's body was found in a house in Seattle where he had previously lived and which he still owned. It was discovered by an electrician who had showed up at around 8:40 a.m. this morning, Friday morning, to do some work at the house. He looked in a window and said he recognized the body on the floor inside as Cobain's. Before calling police, the electrician first called a local radio station to break the news. Although at press time, police were declining to officially identify the body as that of Cobain, pending notification of next of kin, a reporter for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer who was on the scene ID'd the body as Cobain's. And several other news outlets have also gone public with that information. Cobain's wife, singer Courtney Love, had just canceled a UK tour. She was not over there yet with her band Hole. Her current whereabouts are unknown, but she is presumably with the baby daughter she had with Cobain, Frances Bean.
Later that evening, I was going out for dinner with producers and engineers who I knew in London, says Butch Vig. I sat down at a table, and they were like, "Did you hear the news? Kurt died." I freaked out. I went into shock and said, "Guys, I gotta go." I got up and went back to the hotel and took the first flight back to the US. After the shock of Cobain's suicide had abated somewhat, it was arranged for Manson to fly out for a more official audition in Wisconsin. But it was not the slick experience she was expecting. I thought, this is going to be really professional and organized. It's not going to be this riotous chaos that I was familiar with from Goodbye, Mr. Mackenzie. It was nothing like that. They were really untogether. They literally stuck a mic in front of me and said, "Okay, we're going to play you some songs we've written." It was an unmitigated fiasco. It was embarrassing, she told Fox News. It's a miracle that they ever called me back. I'd been in a band for a decade, and on paper, any normal person would assume that I had a lot of experience. And I did have a lot of experience in terms of live performances, but in terms of working in a studio, I had no experience at all. Manson, who initially told Butch Vig, Steve Marker, and Duke Erickson she was a songwriting pro, actually had no experience. She was put to test on that day when the bandmates played some music, expecting Manson to come up with some lyrics. She was stunned. "I've never done it before," recalled Manson. "I was practically mute. I was so petrified. I didn't believe in myself." So of course, nothing came out. However, the musical connection and friendship Manson developed with the group helped her secure a second chance. Despite the rocky start, the band started making headway. They encouraged Manson to reconfigure and add lyrics to tracks already in an infant state. These included future hits, Stupid Girl, and Queer. But at the time, Manson was unsure that she could pull it off. She presented the band with a new song, Milk, which she essentially wrote from scratch. It will go on to become one of the album's biggest hits, although she says now that she took little satisfaction from the accomplishment. She was still struggling to think of herself as a front person. "They loved my voice, but I had no sense of myself as a singer. I didn't think of myself as a singer." During the 1994 to 1995 recording of Garbage, Shirley was suffering from both culture shock and a lack of funds, telling Spin magazine, "I was flat broke, but I come from a very proud culture. People in America talk about money a lot. In Scotland, we don't talk about money. It's not considered polite. But here I was in Madison with pretty much zero money, and the band didn't know that. They did give me per diems, but I didn't immediately become a member of that band. It wasn't until about 3 months in that it was, 'We want you to be a full-time member of this band. We're going to cut you in.' But for the 3 months preceding that, I was pretty much eating once a day at the studio at 9 o'clock at night. I was poor, walking to the studio every day, whether it was fucking minus 10 degrees or 100 degrees. And it was a pretty long way. It's funny to think about now, but in hindsight, I was utterly miserable." In August 1995, the group released their debut album, Garbage, preceded by their first single, Vow, in March 1995. This album was an unexpected smash, selling over 5 million copies and reaching double platinum status in the UK, USA, and Australia. It received great reviews from critics and is featured in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die at number 787. They released 5 singles from this album: Vow, which reached number 97 on the Billboard Hot 100, Only Happy When It Rains, which reached number 55, Queer, which reached number 12 on the Billboard's alternative airplay charts, Stupid Girl, built on a sample of The Clash's Train in Vain, which reached number 24 on the Hot 100, and Milk, which only charted on the Billboard's Bubbling Under Hot 100s chart, which is a chart of 15 singles that was described as a list that predicts which new records will become chart climbers. A non-album single entitled Subhuman was issued on August 7th, 1995. And depending on where you lived, a song that was a B-side to either Vow or Subhuman is the topic of this week's episode. Number 1 Crush.
I would die for her. I would kill for her. Either way, what bliss.
Number 1 Crush was written and recorded between March 1994 and May 1995, in either Marker's basement recording studio or at their own Smart Studios in Madison. Manson was concerned that listeners wouldn't realize the song was about a stalker. It's about somebody who wasn't quite right. The song, however, was slightly autobiographical. Everybody's felt obsessive about something or somebody in their life. I felt crazy about somebody before. That feeling, usually when you're split up with somebody, when you're absolutely obsessed with what they are doing, it's all to do with being pathetic. Number 1 Crush was slated for inclusion on Garbage until Almo Sound's co-founder, Jerry Moss, called his label manager worried that the song might end up a, quote, suicide note. Garbage themselves didn't think the song was particularly strong, with Erickson remembering the lyrics were a bit over the top. Reflecting on the lyrics, Manson felt, all real love is a form of obsession. If you love someone more than anything else, that degree of exclusivity requires an abnormal amount of passion and care, and that could be positive. It's just that keeping it short of unhealthy, short of violence, really requires a bit of moderation. You can't let something like that take over all of your thought processes. Butch Vig later described Number 1 Crush as disturbing. Early in 1996, Garbage's manager, Shannon O'Shea, pitched Number 1 Crush to 20th Century Fox for inclusion on the Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet soundtrack.
Did my heart love till now? For swear at sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night.
In fair Verona, where we lay our scene, 2 households, both alike in dignity.
Throw your mistempered weapons to the ground!
From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life.
Who is it that you love?
Gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce faithfully.
My heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet.
Romeo! Thou art a villain! Sharing someone else's Turn strong! Romeo's no Tibbles! Romeo must not live!
My only love sprung from my only hate.
Romeo is banished!
Maybe they will murder thee.
Let them find me here.
A plague across your houses! I am fortune!
Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes, in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Good night. Good night.
The song was received enthusiastically by Fox, however Almo were dead set against the sync opportunity as the soundtrack would be released on another label, Capitol. After months of negotiation, Almo finally agreed. The promotion team at Capitol planned to release the Garbage track first, and then follow it up with a second song from the soundtrack, The Cardigans' Love Fool. Click right here if you haven't seen that video, or check out the link below. The soundtrack album for Romeo and Juliet was released in North America on October 29, 1996, a few days ahead of the movie itself, which opened wide in cinemas on November 1st. The Romeo and Juliet original soundtrack debuted at number 44 on the Billboard 200. By December, the soundtrack had shot up to number 12, and Billboard declared that Number 1 Crush has become the driving force behind the Romeo and Juliet original soundtrack. Number 1 Crush was nominated for Best Song from a Movie at the 1997 MTV Movie Awards, where it joined Eric Clapton and Babyface with Change the World. from Phenomenon, Madonna with Don't Cry For Me Argentina,
Don't cry for me, Argentina.
from Evita, R. Kelly with
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
and Bush with Machine Head from Fear, which was the winning song. And if you have not seen Fear, go give it a watch. Mark Wahlberg is fucking unhinged.
You got that, my friend?
Aside from Romeo and Juliet, Number One Crush has become an enduring work for the band, featuring in multiple media since, and has also been covered by multiple artists, like The Pretty Fragile. In 2004, the original version of Number One Crush became the theme tune to the British sci-fi drama Hex, since for episodes of the shows La Femme Nikita and True Blood, and is performed by a character in the series Shameless.
I will twist the knife and bleed my aching heart.
And in the movie Soldier's Girl. Number One Crush comes in at 94 beats per minute. You know how some songs just crawl under your skin and leave you feeling, for a lack of a better word, ill? That is what Number One Crush does for me, in a completely different way than Criminal by Fiona Apple does. There's just something about Shirley Manson's delivery that really makes you believe what she is saying. Whether you like it or not, she will never be ignored. And the song speaks to the volumes of how far certain people will go for someone they feel they are entitled to. It almost reads like an incel anthem if you think about it. Infatuation is like a drug, and everyone handles it differently. For some, it means daydreaming, writing your crush's name on a piece of paper, and moving on. And for others, well, there are an endless amount of true crime channels on here that shows you what happens with others. This week's Love Homework is a song that, if you were caught up in the mystifying allure of True Blood, you are very well aware of. A song that describes yet another narrator making mental plans of what they would do with or for the one that they are infatuated with. And that's Bad Things by Jace Everett.
I wanna do bad things with you.
And this week's horror homework is an Indonesian horror flick called Sebelum Iblis Menjemput, May the Devil Take You. I went in blind, and holy shit, not a day passes where I don't think about this movie. It very much feels like a love letter to Sam Raimi, and it is currently streaming on Netflix. Well, that's another episode down, kiddies. And with 3 episodes left this month, the spooky train will keep on a-chugging. So subscribe, drop a like, and hit the bell. Until next time, remember to never say you'll be right back.
I'll be right back!
And remember that you heard it in a love song.